are going to be addressing today.
Yeah.
But, so first of all, we would like to thank our sponsors for today's shir. It's by David and Fran Wolf. It's to commemorate the yahrzeit of Fran's father, Mr. Good. When's the actual yahrzeit?
The 6th of Tishrei.
6th of Tishrei.
In between
I
Rosh
don't
Hashanah.
remember it. It's, what is it, 6 or 7 years?
7 years.
7 years. So Sham Shav Aliyah. And we do thank you. No, it's here. So. To understand Parshas Haazinu, you're going to have to turn back to page 1096. Page 96, where Moshe Rabbeinu, page 1096, which is the Parshas Vayela. You're going to have to turn back. And where Moshe Rabbeinu is warning them that, listen, I'm on my way out. I'm moving on to the different world, 1096. But you guys have to remember that as Jews you have a responsibility. There's something known as Torah, and that's how you fulfill your mission of existence. And to remember your responsibility, to remember what you are about, to remember what you are supposed to focus on, in verse 19, Moshe tells them, Ve'ata, and now, Kitvu lachem et hashira hazot, at the end of the page. So go ahead and write for yourselves this shira, this poem, this song. And what you are supposed to do with it is ve'lamda et bnei Israel, teach it to the children of Israel. Sima befihem, place it in their mouths. Why do they need to know this song? Leman, and the purpose is Ti'aliyah Shira Hazot Le'ed, that this poem, this song, will act like a witness, when just as a witness is there to testify that something that occurred in the past actually did happen, so too this song is to testify that you were warned. That don't think that we had no way of knowing that bad actions lead to tragic events. This Shira is going to act as a witness. This is what they are told. Kitvu lachem et hashira azot. What is this Shira? What is this Shira? So you know that in our tradition, when we study Torah, we always will turn to the commentators that try to explain the basic meaning of the text. We call them the Pashtani, people that give us the pshat, the basic understanding of the text. At the same time, it is very common to turn to the Talmud and Midrashic sources. And what they do in these much, much earlier sources, because when we turn to a Pashtan, when we turn to a commentator that is giving us the most basic understanding, we'll turn to those that lived perhaps 700 years ago, perhaps 500 years ago. But then at times we turn to the older literature, to Talmudic literature of 1600 years ago, and they will give us insight into a verse that when we start thinking about it, it doesn't really fit very well into the basic reading of the verse. And we struggle sometimes with the older explanations than any difficulty we have with the newer ones. Now, you know, difficulty brings about creativity. In other words, if let's say you have a teenager, and you give the teenager the car, and they're supposed to be back at a specific time, and they come 2 hours later, and you start asking them for a reason, that's when creativity develops. In other words, when the teenager is in a difficult situation and they have to come up within a few seconds with a teretz, with an explanation why they are late, right? That is creativity. And we know often, they note that if we would go back in time and take one of the most creative people of history and deal with them, give them therapy for a difficult childhood, let's say as teenagers, odds are they would not be so creative. This is what's pointed out by many, because people that have that struggle from within, it brings out creative beauty. This is the reality of how existence works. You have a difficulty, you start seeking, you start searching, and it brings out this incredible depth and light, right?
So you're happy when your kid comes home late and has a good excuse.
When they come, so at least you know that they're creative. Like you don't know, you may not, be happy with the fact, but at least you develop them in some way, right? That's what occurs. Now, when I look at commentators who give me insight into the parasha, so we have this incredible gift that we have the ability, right, to look at commentators from really 1,500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago, 250 years ago. Now, something occurred about 150 years ago, where commentators started producing, and I could give you a series of 5 names, and probably there are more, of 5 individuals I could mention that suddenly, about 150 years ago, started developing insights that is simply incredible. And why is it? What occurred 150 years ago that somehow put these Talmudic minds and Jewish thinkers into a corner where they started developing greater insight? So you have, in the 19th century, movements that question tradition, right? The movements of the Enlightenment, the Haskalah. And you have, and among the most common challenges to traditional thought and traditional text is what they would call the absurdity that exists in the Talmud, right? That the Talmud, and among the many, many claims they would have, that you turn to the Talmud and they will present you a reading into a text, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the simple reading of the text. So therefore, they would reject all of Talmudic literature. You reject Talmudic literature, and you have to start recreating Judaism from anew. So they create this new Judaism in the middle of the 19th century. So now, if you are one who understands that there's great wisdom in the Talmud, and if you understand that those traditions that were handed down kept us alive and there's depth in it, so it demanded from the traditionalists to go back to the books and to try to explain and to try to defend Talmudic readings and point and somehow indicate that if you read the text of the Torah carefully, you will find there a reference to the Talmudic way of thinking. Meaning it's not there with a simple reading, but if you put time and effort and energy and thought, you will discover that indeed they do somehow come together. So therefore you have thinkers like Reb Shamshin Raphael Hirsch, right? Tremendous insight, a tremendous contribution. It is because that era put him in that challenging position. There was a Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, right? Kaktava Kabbalah. Incredible insights, right? For hundreds of years, you did not have such insights. Why is it? The exact same position. You had the Malbim, for example, one of the commentators of the era, right? Had this ability to come up with insight, made the contribution, and changed our appreciation of the depth of the text. Rabbi Meir Simcha of Devinsk, and the list is very, very long. And what is attempted since then, people that at one time do appreciate the simple reading of the text. Now again, if you come from many Hasidic thinkers, they're very detached from the text. And they have no issue. They don't sweat these issues. They read the text, and even if it doesn't fit with the pshuto, with the simple reading, they're cool, they're fine, they're still inspired, it inspires them to think about God, and they're happy, and Shalom Al Yisrael. For others who understand that, yes, there is a concept of the simple reading of the text that cannot be ignored, so these thinkers make this incredible contribution. So now, let's read again this verse, and I'll share with you the rabbinic reading, and then we'll go ahead and read the simple reading. So come the rabbis in the Talmud, and they tell us that you should know that there is a mitzvah in the Torah. One of the 613 commandments is actually to write a Sefer Torah. Anyone here has fulfilled the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah yet?
A letter.
I'll let you do a letter. I was once invited to a magnificent bar mitzvah, and they told me you could write a letter. And I go up and I sit next to the sofa, and he says, "Okay, you're sitting," and he wrote the letter. Right? So I saw someone performing a mitzvah, which is a nice thing as well. So, but there are times that they let some people write a letter. Is that really writing a Sefer Torah? How is that achieved? So many of you, I'm sure, have participated financially in writing a Sefer Torah, right? So you are a participant in the mitzvah because you had a messenger doing it for you, and you made a contribution. That's good. Then there are those, and this goes back, Rabbeinu Asher, about 700 and something years ago, notes that this is a unique mitzvah, he tells us, because this is a mitzvah that is there to preserve Judaism. You want to preserve Judaism? So Judaism will not be preserved by just having Jewish musical festivals. It's nice, right? It's inspiring, but that's not really the guarantee that in 200 years from now there's going to be Jews practicing Judaism. What keeps Judaism alive? Having a Sefer Torah. However, that's not enough. You have to have Jewish books. You have Jewish books, so this is what he notes. You have Jewish books at home. You purchase those books. You have those books. You turn to those books for meaning in life. That is how you fulfill this mitzvah, because this is a mitzvah of continuity. This is how he says. So therefore, it calms us down a little bit that even though we have not, as far as I know in this room, any of us have sat down and written a complete Sefer Torah, we've either participated or we have our Jewish books, and we play our role through that. Fine. Now, where do the rabbis derive this idea that there's a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah? So they say it's a verse in the Torah, Va'ata, verse 19, Kitvu lachem, go ahead and write for yourselves this shira, this song. End of rabbinic statement. Now, do we have a level of difficulty with it? Yeah, because if you read in context what's happening here, what's happening is Moshe Rabbeinu saying, listen, I'm moving on. I want you to remember a song. And right after this chapter, there is actually a song. And the song is Haazinu. So what are we talking about here? So when you would teach a child this verse, the basic reading of the text is the song that is referred to here is Haazinu, not writing a Sefer Torah. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with a rabbinic reading that seems to be very, very different, very, very different than the basic reading?
Is Shira ever referred to as a Sefer Torah?
Oh, so now we have to understand, is the Torah really referred to as a Shira? And what we're going to see is that actually, yes. The Torah is supposed to be like a song. It's supposed to be like a poem. But what we're going to do now is we're going to actually turn to the words of the Rambam, who gives us some clarity. Rambam is not a modern commentator, but listen carefully to what he tells us. Okay, mitzvah teseh, it's a positive commandment. This I'm just sharing with you from the Rambam. It's a positive commandment. Al kol ish ve'ish me'Yisrael lichtov sefer Torah la'atzmo, to write a sefer Torah. Shene'emar, and he quotes our verse. V'atakitvu lachem et hashira. Kelomar, and now he clarifies. This is how you should read the verse. Kitvu lachem Torah. Write for yourself the complete Torah. And in the Torah, yesh ba shirazu. In the Torah, you have Haazinu. In the Torah, you have Haazinu. Once you write Haazinu, you have to write the whole Torah. Why? Lefi, and the reason is she'en kotvin et Torah parshiyot. You do not write sections of Torah for the purpose of study that only contain one section. It's something you shouldn't do. In other words, when we talk about Torah, the Torah itself inspires us, and the Torah itself educates us. It inspires us, right? You see a Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah, they open the Aron Kodesh. We stand up. Even if they're not planning to take out a Sefer Torah, we are inspired by its existence. We stand up to honor it. Okay? And to be inspired by Torah, you can even be inspired by a section of Torah. In other words, when you walk into a room and you see the mezuzah, So what is it really there for? It is not there for you to study, right? Please, I do not want to see people walking into rooms, yanking off the mezuzah, right? Opening it up and reading Shema Yisrael and then putting back. That's not what it's there for. It is there that you are knowledgeable, you are mindful of the fact that the text is there. It's the text that reminds us that there's a creator, that we are walking into a home and we have a mission to fulfill, and there's purpose in life, there's purpose in existence, and if there's challenge in life, well, we could learn from it and deal with it. There are many tremendous messages. That is to inspire you. To inspire you, to become inspired, you could be inspired even if it's only a section of the Torah. You don't have, your mezuzah doesn't have all of Torah, that's fine, because you're not studying from the text. Now, when it comes to mezuzah, people have the custom, some people kiss the mezuzah, right? Not a requirement. Sometimes you see people that have become so much of a rote that they'll walk into any room, right? They'll walk into a Starbucks, I've seen, and they kiss the doorpost, right? There's no mezuzah in Starbucks. But the idea is that you can become so accustomed to go ahead and touch the post that you do it just without thinking, right?
It's a holy place.
There are no question, not putting down the importance of having coffee and being thankful to the Almighty that there's such a thing called coffee, not minimizing it. But at the same time, it's more important to once in a while walk in and think, that really symbolizes something.
Can you photocopy one page of the Chumash if you're learning and you don't want to schlep?
Okay, so to photocopy one page is fine, right? But to go ahead and record, to write a text, and as if claim, this is a section of Torah that inspires me. Let's say a person really, really is inspired by the story of Avraham and Sarah. And he decides, listen, my Sefer Torah, I can't write a whole Sefer Torah at home. I'm going to hire a sofer who's just going to write for me Parashat Lech Lecha. That is very, very problematic. Because suddenly, when it comes to study, you make one text the important text. When you emphasize too much in Judaism, by the way, you could actually destroy Judaism. Mm-hmm. This is just an important rule. We are coming now into the high holiday season, right? And there are two ways to damage the season. Two ways. One way is to go ahead and believe that this is a time that we just have to eat straight. 3 days in a row, right? 3 times in 4 weeks. It's all about the food, right? And it's about the wine. And, I'm not saying I understand there are people that have been cooking and the freezers are loaded. I know very, very well. They're not. Okay, Swiss chocolate. So, but that's not everything. It's not everything. If all it becomes is an activity of eating, we're losing out something very significant. Now, if on the other hand, if all it turns into is a season of fear, right? If all you hear about Yom Adin, you're nervous, you're not nervous enough, you're not shaking enough, right? You're able to sleep before Rosh Hashanah, what are you nuts? It's Day of Judgment, how can you be sleeping, right? If you would have a trial tomorrow and they will be deciding, I've heard these talks, and they're going to be deciding if it's life or death, would you be able to sleep? So how are you sleeping? Did you sleep last night? You should feel guilty that you slept last night. You're not guilty. What? Whoever's sleeping. So you overdo it. You go ahead and overdo it and make it into all fear. You're going to destroy it as well. So Judaism is always about balance. That is the theme, and we're going to see soon that this is really the message of Haazinu. Balance things, right? Like in the words of the prophets, Gilu, you have to be happy during the high holiday season. It's a privilege, right? We come, we have meaning, we have clarity. Bere'adah, now, it is after all judgment, so balance it correctly with maturity, right? That a sign of a mature person is the ability to deal with more than one emotion at a time. In other words, that yes, it is significant, but I'm not going to be overwhelmed by it. I'm not going to ignore it. And sometimes, by the way, history has proven that if you overemphasize something and make it too scary, the reaction is going to be a complete rejection of it. Why is it going to be a complete rejection? It is so overwhelming, the experience. It is so overwhelming that you simply can't deal with it, so you walk away. It's a major problem in many communities where they make things so strict and so difficult emotionally that people simply dump it. They move on, right? I give a lot of credit. There's a well-known singer. His name is Lipa Schmelzer. You've heard the name of Lipa Schmelzer? He's an entertainer.
Sure.
Now, Lipa Schmelzer grew up in New Square, right? New Square. It's a Hasidic community, and you live in a square, basically. I don't know what's new there, but everything is squared off from you from the world outside, and it's a very, very strict Hasidic environment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, throughout, as you know, many people growing up in such environments, it is too overwhelming. So what happens? They reject it all. You had the book that you had at your book review here. You reject it all. You reject it all. So where do you go? You go as far as possible, right? You go as far as possible, and you lose it all, because forget about happiness, right? When a person grew up with it, right? They might claim that there's happiness, and this is a problem that exists in Israel as well. That you people from a very strict environment, they reject it, they leave it. The sad thing is that it's not just that they're leaving something that has within it some magnificence, they're leaving happiness as well, because the guilt is the first thing that is the only thing that remains with them. Tragic. What's beautiful about Lipa Schmelzer? Lipa Schmelzer is more creative. Lipa Schmelzer wears funny yarmulkes, and his music is off. He has weird glasses and weird clothes, and his music is off. And he agitated some people there. He had to leave. But what's magnificent? He left and he created his own world that still has tradition, his own flavor. And he even opened a shul somewhere in Monsey where he invites people that are like him. You know, we're a little bit different, right? We have our own style. We're more open to education. He even trained himself and he went to college. He did some incredible things without the rejection. Now that is magnificent. Why? Because number one, he has tradition with him, right? And number two, he doesn't have to deal with the nonsense of the guilt that you find. He is living a full life. That he is really an inspiration. And he should be a leader of those who need to go ahead and walk away. Lipa Schmelzer is a sign of that ability to not reject it all. He had the gift, and it's an incredible courage to balance it, right? To balance things. That is proper Judaism. Writing one section of Torah, and only one section of Torah, symbolizes this becomes everything for me. Things are not good. When there's overemphasis on one thing, you're going to go ahead and cause damage in another area. And it's interesting among the Musar thinkers. They had their own development over the year, but for example, they recommended to reject a lot of the practices like going to Tashlich. And they even tried to minimize kaparas. In other words, there was a belief by them that if you overemphasize something external on the high holiday season, you don't work on internal development. So balance, every generation has to figure out what the proper balance is. It's very dangerous, by the way, to take just literature from the past and apply it to today. That aside, why do we need to have, Rambam is telling us, you do not write a Sefer Torah with only one section. Since the Torah tells us in this verse, the simple reading of the verses, Kitvu lachem et ha-shira hazot, write this song. The Torah wants us to write Haazinu. The Torah is telling us in the same statement, write all of Torah. And suddenly the simple reading of the verse fits into the mitzvah that the rabbis had, a tradition that you are supposed to write a Sefer Torah. You hear the idea what Rambam achieves with this reading? Fine. Now, suddenly, by the way, the result is that Parshas Haazinu becomes like the pivot. It's what holds all of Torah together. So now we are ready. This is all an introduction to understand Parshas Haazinu. What is Parshas Haazinu? It's a song. So page 1100. It's a song. Now, warn the people of Israel, you have to stick to your values, right? And be aware that you have a mission to humanity. You don't fulfill it. You ignore your responsibility. You get off track. There are going to be reminders, right? So, for example, if you turn to the last verse on page 1100, Zechor Yomot Olam, the Jew, a good Jew, learns history. right? Judaism is not just a world where you believe that I'm placed in this world, I have a neshama, I have to make good decisions, and if I make good decisions, after 120 I get olam haba, right? If you only have that attitude towards Judaism, that is not a balanced Judaism. Judaism also requires you to value the world and value your mission in this world and study the history of the world. Studying Jewish history is a must. Zechor Yomot Olam. And binu, develop an understanding of every generation. Because if you know the past, you're not going to repeat the history, the mistakes of the... If you know it, you're not going to repeat those mistakes. And how do you figure things out? Page 1102. Shalavicha v'yagetcha. Ask your father, right? Zekenecha v'yomru lach. Lehagid usually is like a harsher term than lomar. In other words, if I tell someone to clean up the word, higadeti lechatvav, right? Tinaket acheder, clean up your room, lehagid. Amira is more in a relaxed term, right? So the parent is shalavicha v'yagetcha. Sometimes the parent has to be strict. And zekenecha, if you have the merit of playing the role of a zaken or a zkenav, of elders, what you share with the generation, they say, my mother says that, that grandchildren and grandparents have a good relationship because they have a common enemy. That's what it is. But the truth is, the role of a grandparent is that you realize that you don't have, right? It's amazing, from what I understand, that you have the ability to have, to spend wonderful time, and then when it's time to change the diaper, you return it back to the parent, or at least it should be, or I'm dreaming. So, nothing wrong with that. So now, but you do have that opportunity of, you don't have to focus on the harshness of chinuch, you can focus just on value of life, value of tradition, who we are, zkenecha v'yomru lach. What do you tell them? So you share with them the history of the world in verse 8, that when the Supreme One separated nations, he did it for the sake of the Jewish people. Right? Verse 8, let's read verse 8 inside. Behanchel Elyon Goim, when the Supreme One, the Elyon, gave nations their boundaries, Behafrido bnei Adam, when he separated the children of man, Yatsev Gvulot Amim, he set the borders of people. He created this idea of nationalism, Lemispar bnei Israel, due to the fact that there's going to be a small number of Jews. In other words, you remember it when I remember when in 1990 when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait, and they talked about the brutality of the Iraqi soldiers when they invaded, how they walked into hospitals and just took babies out of incubators and just threw them out and took them back to Baghdad. The brutality of these animals. And I remember thinking, like, these are people that, who do they really, really hate? I mean, they may hate their other Muslims, but they really hate the Jews. Imagine if the Chas v'Sholom, they would have the opportunity of doing it to the state of Israel, right? We only survive in the Middle East. The biggest gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us is that they're fighting one another, right? You think about the Iraq-Iran war, right? What they did to one another. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew, it appears, and this is a reading into the verse, that he established boundaries and nationalism, and there is no unity among the nations of the world, right? The Saudis hate the Iranians, right? And these are things that are good for us, believe it or not. Right? We survive because unfortunately there's such hatred towards the people of Israel. Yatsev Gvulot Amim, he established this concept of borders and nationalism to protect the Jewish people. So this is really what this text is telling us, right? The Jew, unfortunately, you're going to be hated, but there's a God that's preserving you. Now, it tells us also that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this incredible land called the land of Israel. And when the Jewish people are fulfilling their mission in Israel, these incredible things are being achieved, right? And, this is something we're very aware of. But unfortunately, when you are having that success in the land of Israel, don't forget your responsibility. And therefore, in verse 15, at the end of page 1102, the great concern is that the Jewish person will become too comfortable and forget. Vayishman Yeshurun. Yeshurun, or the Jewish people, we're going to focus in on that word too, Yeshurun, the Jewish people, are going to become, unfortunately, shamen, fat. And what happens when you're comfortable and you have everything you need and you're enjoying life, you want to enjoy life a little bit more and a little bit more, and you forget about the need of the neighbor and you forget about the concept of justice. You don't want to go ahead and fulfill your responsibilities. So what do you do to your tradition? Vaivat, you kick it. And shamata, you became fat, you became thick, you became corrupt. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, oh, you're not using Israel correctly. You don't belong there. The text of this song ends with them eventually returning in judgment upon the nations. Fine? So this is a song that tells us the history of the people of Israel. So now, one of the commentators that I mentioned earlier of this, of 150 years ago, Rabbi Mecklenburg notes that the word shira, this is a shira, relates to the word yashar. Shira, yashar. Now, one of the many things that I wish I would have a talent for was music. Now, I enjoy listening to music. I used to have the ability even to carry a tune when I do, but it's not. I had a very good voice when I was younger. I had a very, very good voice when I was younger. We used to sing at home. We were musical. But the regret is, I cannot play a musical instrument. Right? Period. Like they're not. London Symphony I will never be there. Period. No question about that.
Never too late.
Never say never. You say what?
Never too late.
Never too late. Ask.
Jack.
When did you start?
Other people.
When did you start?
Concert violin.
In my mid-50s.
Oh.
For the shadows.
Thank you. Now, it's interesting that my great-grandfather was a big rabbi and a big Torah scholar, and they say, I read that when he would want to relax, he would pull out a violin.
Yeah.
So maybe so that's something we have to figure out. Musical. Now, when it comes to music, there's structure. There's structure in music. There's an understanding that you can't, when you have a song with a chorus, you can't just repeat the chorus over and over and over again. I'm sure even if it's the most magnificent piece of music, if you'll have the chorus over and over, envision that, it will make you go, mishuga. There has to be balance, right? There has to be an understanding that there's different components that come together, and that's what produces magnificent music. This song symbolizes Torah, symbolizes the Jewish journey, and symbolizes the Jewish mission. Judaism, good Judaism, is yashar, is straight. In other words, we have where we are today, where we want to go tomorrow, right? Our mission for the future, and not to be pulled in the wrong directions, right? In other words, too much focus on olam haba, right? When I hear the only thing I talk about, when you hear people saying that our whole purpose of existence is to get to the world to come, right? That's not a good statement, because what about taking care of this world? God wants you to take care of this world. God wants you to make a difference in the world, to be, in other words, that He wants, the welfare of the environment. That is part of Judaism too. Because God said, I created this world, it's a magnificent world, appreciate its magnificence, recognize God. Rambam tells us you develop a love of God by seeing the Alps. He didn't mention the Alps, but I have no doubt that the Rambam would agree that you go to Eger, and you walk there in Austria and in Switzerland, and you see this incredible scene, right? You say, you know what? There's a creator. Marabu Masech Hashem. You develop a love of God. Value this world, right? So don't just focus on your personal mitzvahs. I did a mitzvah, I got credits, right? Eventually they're going to develop an app that a person can figure out his spiritual score, right? To know where he's holding. And all you are going to do is walk around with your phone and see where I'm holding, how many mitzvahs I personally did.
It's a great idea.
Right? It's a great idea. Marketing.
He's got a new word.
What is it?
Fitbit.
Fitbit, okay? A mitzvah bit, or something like that. So, now, on the other end, if you only think of this world and don't take into consideration that, yes, there is a neshama, and the neshama lives on, it's also no good. You have to stay yashar in Judaism. You have to, it's like a song, stay on tune, right? You can't just float away, right? You have to know when you are supposed to emphasize each thing, right? On Tisha B'Av, you focus on the loss and the difficulties of the people of Israel. During this period of time, you talk about the significance of actions. On Purim, you're supposed to be happy. You have to know that you have to go and flow with the times. Have the beat, right? You have to go ahead and make your life into a song. That is what the Shira, you have to stay yashar. And when the Jew loses his yeshirut, his yeshurun, that's when the tragedy starts. So in the song itself, when we read that Klal Yisrael is having success in the land of Israel, but they go bad. The words are Vaishman Yeshurun. The people that were supposed to stay straight. You were supposed to stay on the song. You were supposed to stay on the right, on the Shirah. That is something that you went ahead and you lost. This is the story of the people of Israel. This is the warning. Stay balanced, right? And when there's a focus too much on fear, right, you're going to unbalance it. When there's only a focus, when everything is a joke, right, you're also not going to be fulfilling your responsibility. Balance it and stay yashar. This is what we are being told. And by the way, avodah zarah often is the byproduct of seeking some kind of fix, some spiritual fix. You would go ahead and pull out of your pocket some pagan image, and you feel a high, a spiritual high, right? And sometimes Judaism does not offer that, because Judaism is, they compare, believe it or not, Judaism is like a marriage. Avodah zarah was like having an affair. This is what our rabbis tell us. A marriage is a relationship, right? You have a mission together. There's devotion, there's commitment. There are times that you have to put time and energy in figuring out situations, right? It's not going to be always, but it's not easy, always not, but meaningful every single day, right? There's purpose every single day. You're on a mission, you're creating these incredible things, you're doing wonderful things together, and there's responsibility, devotion, commitment. The affair, right? You know, there are many good movies that point to this idea of one person having an affair once for fun, and then there goes their whole life, right? For those few good seconds of enjoyment, of a thrill, right? Life is destroyed. Families are destroyed, right? That's avodah zarah. There was a thrill. There's no question about it. But you go off that path, that balanced path, everything falls apart. Stay straight. This is what we are told. Fine, so at least we have an idea what Haazinu is trying to achieve. It is the pivot of Torah. It holds Torah together. It tells you it's a song. It tells you to say, stay straight, and this is our responsibility. But there's one other thing we have to remember. The Talmud notes that throughout Tanakh you will find many poems, many songs. And in Tanakh, we are told, for example, that there are songs that are supposed to be written in a very specific structure. If, for example, you read Parashat Bishalach, and you read about the song when they crossed the sea. So we are told that you write it with gaps. There's supposed to be a gap. A gap, you see the gaps? That means there's text, gap, text. On the line under it, there is going to be gap, text, gap, meaning you are sure to build it and structure it in a way that you have gap under text and text on top of gap. Fine. Now, the rabbis tell us that on the other hand, there is a type of shirah that you have to be sure to write it in a way where there is what they call brick upon brick upon brick upon brick. And the example presented for this idea is in the book of Yehoshua. In the book of Yehoshua, we are told that there were 31 nations that had in the land of Israel like an embassy, right? Like small nations. And all of them were very anti-Israel because they were members of the United Nations. So when they were listed, we listed them in a way that symbolizes a structure that's not steady. What is considered a structure that is not steady? So a builder, I don't play music and I don't know how to build. But one thing I do know is that if you place a brick upon a brick upon a brick, you know what, you're going to have a structure that with one little push it's gone. The song, the shirah that we saw earlier, that is considered a sturdy structure. This is considered the 31 kings. that did not like the people of Israel. This is called a brick upon brick structure. It is built in such a way to symbolize the idea that we do not want them to stand. We want them to have a weak existence.
That's like Haman's sons.
Exactly, Haman's sons. Those that we want them, with one push, to vanish. This is what is symbolized with these different structures. Now, this concept is magnificent, but we have one problem with it. You open Parashat Haazinu, and you look at the structure as it is in your Chumash, and it is built with a very weak structure. Why is it with a weaker structure? We want the Jewish people to survive. That's the question. Commentators explain that you should know the Jewish people actually are a very weak nation. And logically speaking, the Jewish people are not ones. If you study Jewish history, and you study the fact that we had our own ideals, our own attitude, our own identity, we were not the strongest of all nations. And we were at the same time people that had that desire to adapt to the society around us. Logically speaking, we were supposed to vanish thousands of years ago. We were a weak nation. We are a weak structure. Why do we survive? Because our survival is not due to anything physical, it's something supernatural. We have a mission. We had a covenant with the Almighty 3,400 years ago, and He said, you are going to be the ones to symbolize my essence. You are the ones to be my ambassadors to the world. You're Shvach HaMaisis, you Jews. So I'll be with you as long as you are with me. And you're going to be around, I guarantee it. But when you turn away from me, the Jews in the Middle East, right? Look at a map at the Middle East, right? We have every single year before Rosh Hashanah, we get our Iran reminder, right? It is unbelievable how leading into the holiday season, we want to get reminded what to pray for. So we see these hurricanes, but we also have the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, 24 hours before Rosh Hashanah, standing there in the United Nations with his concerns. And it's a reminder. What is it there for? Will the United Nations listen? I don't think so, right? Will Trump do something? Ich weiß nicht. I don't know. But will we do something? Of course we will, because we have what to daven for. And we recognize that on our own, right? On our own, we will not do well. We fulfill our responsibility with the Almighty. We turn to Him in prayer. We're in good shape. Nothing to worry about. We are a Haazinu. This is our essence. We are supposed to be a song, but at the same time, we're not very sturdy. When we carry God, we are around. We stick to these values, we stick to Torah, we are around. And that is why it's structured in such a way. This is a message that appears in this very significant song, right? The pivot of Torah. It holds Torah together, and hopefully we will merit to learn this lesson, live a life of meaning, do good to the world, stay yashar, stay balanced in Judaism, and merit that we continue to be the carriers of a very significant message into the new year. A Shana Tova to everyone. And I do thank everyone for coming. We see you next week. We are here next week. We will do V'zot HaBracha. V'zot HaBracha. Usually we haven't had that opportunity. The week after that, which is right before Sukkot, and I'll be building probably the Sukkah, then we'll take off for 2 weeks, but then we're back. Sounds good? But we see you next week. Same place, 10:15. Thank you so much.